There are moments in life that split everything into a before and an after. Moments when you realize you'll never be the same person again. Mine happened on an ordinary Friday night, in the living room of our apartment, when my best friend looked at me with that crooked smile and asked me something that would change absolutely everything. My name is Lucas. I'm 26, I work as a freelance graphic designer, and for the last 3 years I've been keeping a secret that burned inside me every time I looked at him. Raphael. Rafa. My best friend since college. 7 years of friendship. 2 years sharing this 2-bedroom apartment where everything always felt so safe. So predictable. Until that night. Have you ever had that kind of friendship where people on the outside don't understand how you fit together so perfectly? Where there's an intimacy that blurs the lines of what's considered normal between two guys? Rafa was always like that with me. Physically present in a way that left me confused. A hand on my shoulder that lingered a few seconds longer. That tight hug after a rough day. The way he'd collapse into my room at 2 in the morning after breaking up with some girlfriend, lying on my bed and talking about how empty he felt. I pretended it was normal. Pretended my heart didn't race every time. Pretended I didn't spend whole nights analyzing every gesture, every word, looking for signs that probably never existed. Because Rafa was straight, had been his whole life. And I was just the gay best friend he'd had since we met in that ridiculous college project where design and engineering had to build an app together. I remember the first time I saw him in the meeting room. Messy black hair, a worn gray hoodie, an easy smile that lit up the whole place. He stuck out his hand and said, "Raphael, but you can call me Rafa, everyone does." And I knew, right then and there, that I was screwed. But that was 7 years ago. And for the last 3 years, since I realized what I felt had stopped being friendship and become something deeper, much more painful, I put up walls. I kept my mouth shut. Smiled when he talked about girls. Pretended to be just the confidant, the brother, the roommate who split the internet bill and complained about dirty dishes in the sink. That Friday started like any other. I worked all day in my room, finishing a visual identity project for a tech startup. Rafa had left work early for a happy hour with his coworkers. Software engineering startup, that scene full of young people, craft beer and conversations about investors. He texted me around 9. "Heading out, Uber's coming. Grab that whiskey you like." Normal, usual. We always did this on Fridays. He'd get home, we'd order food, watch some terrible show, and complain about the week. A sacred best friend ritual I secretly loved and hated with the same intensity. But when the apartment door opened and he stepped in, I knew something was different. He was drunk. Not that cheerful, chatty drunk he usually was. There was something heavier in the way he dropped his backpack on the floor, the way he kicked off his sneakers without untying them, the way he ran his hand through his hair with that tired gesture I knew so well. He was holding a bottle of Johnny Walker Black Label in his left hand, still sealed. "Hey man." His voice was slurred, shaky. He flopped onto the gray corner couch we'd picked up at an outlet last year. What a night. I was at the open kitchen, reheating leftover pasta. I looked at him over the counter. "Rough night? You have no idea." I turned off the stove, grabbed 2 glasses, and headed to the living room. Sat on the other end of the couch, keeping that familiar space between us. He opened the bottle, poured generous measures into both glasses, and handed me one. Our fingers touched for a second. A single damn second that made my stomach flip. "Did something happen?" I asked, trying to sound casual. Rafa took a long sip, closed his eyes. Marina was there. Marina. His ex from 6 months back who'd broken things off about 3 weeks ago. He'd been wrecked. Spent 2 days in my room. Sleeping in my bed while I worked from my desk chair, waking up constantly to ask if he was an idiot. And she was with a guy. He opened his eyes, staring at the ceiling. A guy who works in finance, that Pedro she always said was just a friend. Ah, the old story. "I'm sorry, man." "No." He shook his head. "That's not it. Like, it hurt to see, right? But it's not about her. It's..." He stopped. Took another sip. I kept watching them. The way she laughed at his jokes, how she leaned into him, and I realized something really strange. I waited. The silence in the room grew thick. Outside, the The sound of horns and motorcycles echoed through the half-open window. The corner lamp cast soft shadows on the walls. I never felt that with her. His voice was low, almost a whisper. That real connection, you know? I mean, I liked her. We were intimate. But there was this part of me that held back, that stayed shut, distant. My heart started pounding faster. I didn't answer. I just gripped the glass tighter. And here's the thing, Lucas. He finally turned to face me. His dark eyes were glazed, but something was there. Something raw. Something dangerously honest. The worst part? I know exactly who I feel that connection with. The air left my lungs. He didn't say it, didn't need to. The way he looked at me, like he was seeing something for the first time, like a door that had always been locked finally cracked open. Rafa, you've had too much, I said, trying to break the moment, trying to rebuild the walls that were crumbling. Let's order food. Watch something. Tomorrow this'll seem different. But he didn't look away. He just leaned his body toward me. Not much. Just enough for me to feel his warmth. For the smell of whiskey mixed with that cheap cologne he always wore to invade my space. I have a date tomorrow, he said, voice even lower. With Camilla, the HR girl. I know. My voice came out oddly steady, considering I was falling apart inside. And I'm scared. Scared? Of screwing up again. Of feeling that emptiness. Of pretending everything's fine when I don't actually feel anything. He bit his lower lip, a nervous gesture I'd seen hundreds of times. I know this sounds completely crazy, but... He stopped, took a deep breath, as if he were about to jump off a cliff. Can you help me practice? The world stopped. I blinked. Once. Twice. Trying to process the words that had just come out of his mouth. Practice? I repeated, my voice higher than I wanted. He rubbed his face. I know it's crazy, but it's... With you, it's different, Lucas. With you, I can just be myself. No pretense, no acting. You're the only person I can actually be like this with. And I thought maybe, if I practiced with you, maybe I could figure out what's off. My brain short-circuited. Practice what exactly? Talking, flirting. Or was he suggesting... No way. He was drunk, confused, hurting from the breakup. This was just a messy post-breakup meltdown, but his eyes didn't look confused. They looked like something much more dangerous. Desperation. Truth. Rafa, I tried to find words. Any words. This isn't... You're not thinking clearly. It's the whiskey. It's Marina. Tomorrow you'll realize that... I'm not going to change my mind. He cut in, firm for the first time. I know it sounds insane, but you're the only person I trust for this. For this. For this. I looked at him. At my best friend of 7 years. At the guy I'd loved in silence for 3. At the straight man who was asking me for something I couldn't fully understand, but that made every nerve ending in my body go to maximum alert. On the coffee table, the whiskey bottle sat half empty. On the shelf, the framed photo from our graduation stared back at us. 2 guys smiling, clueless about what was coming. My phone buzzed in my sweatpants pocket, but I ignored it. The outside world had vanished. There was only that apartment, that living room, that couch, that impossible moment. So? His voice came out almost a whisper. Can you help me practice? Can you help me practice? His question looped endlessly in my head. Practice. What exactly? Kissing? Intimacy? More? And why was he asking me? Why me? My brain had completely crashed, like a computer trying to load a broken file. I couldn't move. My legs were literally frozen in the middle of the room, between the front door and where Rafa sat on the couch, with those puppy dog eyes looking at me like I was the only person who could save him from something I didn't even understand. My heart pounded so hard I could hear it in my ears, like a drum beat before an execution. Practice. The word spun in my head. Practicing with your best gay friend before going out with a girl. Did that make sense to him? Because it made no sense to me. Or it made too much sense. I didn't know anymore. I never had. Raphael still watched me, waiting for an answer. Any answer. And me? I was completely stuck, because answering that question wasn't simple. It wasn't a yes or a no. It was much more complicated than that. Because saying yes meant what? That I'd let myself be used as a practice dummy so he could impress someone else? That I'd feed a fantasy for a few minutes only to watch it shatter when he left and kissed some girl with bright eyes and an easy laugh? But saying no was even worse. Because it meant closing a door I didn't even know would open again. It meant denying the only chance I might ever have in my life to feel those lips on mine, even if it was only for a few seconds. Even if it meant nothing to him. Even if it destroyed whatever shred of sanity I had left. Ever been stuck at a crossroads where every exit leads somewhere destructive? Where you know that whatever you choose, something inside you dies? That was me in that moment. So then, out of nowhere, my mind did what it always does when I panic. It went through the past looking for signs, clues, any evidence this wasn't completely insane. That maybe, just maybe, there was something behind this ask that went beyond a simple kiss practice. My mind raced back 3 years, to the day I realized what I felt wasn't just friendship. It was a night like this. He'd just broken up with his girlfriend, Mariana, and showed up at my door at 2 a.m, red-eyed, voice shaking. "I love you, man," he said, flopping onto my bed like it was the only solid ground in a sea of chaos. "You're the only one who really gets me." And I sat on the bed edge, his hand in mine, feeling my heart cave in. Because I knew that "I love you" wasn't the kind I wanted. It was friendship love, brother love, a refuge. But that night he stayed in my bed. In the morning, I woke to him spooning me, his arm across my waist, his face against my neck. I didn't move, trying to burn that moment into my memory, knowing it wouldn't happen again. Not for real. But it did repeat. Not once, not twice. Every time he broke up with someone, he came to sleep with me. Every time the outside world got too heavy, my bed became his refuge. And each time, I died a little more inside, because every hug from him was a false promise my heart kept believing. About 2 years ago, we went to this party. He had too much to drink, and on the Uber ride home, he rested his head on my shoulder, quiet, fingers locked with mine. The driver caught us in the rear-view mirror with that smile people give when they think they're watching a couple. Me? I pretended not to notice, pretended it was normal, pretended my chest wasn't exploding from happiness and despair mixed together. At the building door, he hugged me and whispered right in my ear, "You know you're special, right? Really special." Then he kissed me, but not on the mouth. It was a cheek kiss, right at the corner of my lips. Close enough that I felt his breath warm against my skin. Close enough that for a second I thought he'd turn and kiss me for real. He didn't. Never did. So I kept collecting breadcrumbs, long looks, touches that lingered a beat too long, words with double meanings, one obvious and one hidden. I became an expert at reading every detail, every gesture, every smile. Like a detective on a case that probably didn't exist, assembling clues that could have been pure desperation and fantasy. One day he asked if I'd ever hooked up with someone I really liked. We were on the apartment balcony drinking beer, watching the sunset. I almost told him, almost said yes. I'm losing it over a guy who lives with me, shares his life, hugs me, sleeps in my bed, but will never want me back. I didn't. Just shrugged and changed the subject. He didn't push. Did he know? Subconsciously sense what was happening? Or was I invisible, too transparent to ever be a romantic option? Then his voice brought me back to the present, to the gray couch in our living room, to the bottle of whiskey on the coffee table, to the chasm that had opened between us. "You okay? You kind of froze there." I took a deep breath. I needed to say something. Anything. But what? What do you say when the person you've been in love with for 3 years, the guy you see every day, who sleeps 2 meters from your bed, asks you to help him practice intimacy with someone else? "Rafa," I started, my voice weaker than expected. I'm not sure this is a good idea." "Why?" He tilted his head, genuinely confused. Don't you trust me? It's not that. I trust you. But I need you to understand this isn't simple for me. Why wouldn't it be simple? We've been friends 7 years, man. We trust each other. I'm just asking for a favor. That's it. Just like that. As if it were simple. As if he wasn't asking me to rip open my chest and let him take out my heart while it's still beating. Because I tried to organize my thoughts. Because this could complicate things between us. And I don't want anything to ruin our friendship. He looked at me for a moment, like he was really trying to get it. Then he said something that completely disarmed me. Lucas, you're the most important person in my life. Nothing changes that. Nothing. If you don't want to, it's fine. We'll move on like it never happened. But I trust you, more than anyone. That's why I'm asking. That's why it has to be you. Only you. Those words cut right through me. He was saying exactly what I'd always needed to hear, while asking for something that could completely destroy me. I sat on the couch, keeping distance between us. My mind was at war. On one side, desperate need to say yes, to touch him, feel him, have those minutes of fantasy, even knowing it would destroy me after. On the other, my survival instinct screaming to pull back, to protect whatever was left of my heart. But there was a third thing in all this. A question I'd never really asked myself because I was too scared of the answer. What do I actually want? Do I want him to kiss me and realize he feels something? Do I want this to become something bigger? Or do I just need the suffering to stop and finally get a real answer, even if it's no? What's the real way out of this maze? Because all the doors seem to lead to some kind of pain. But maybe, just maybe, one of them led to something beyond the pain. To some kind of truth I needed to hear, even if it broke me in two. Rafa was looking at me, waiting, and I realized I couldn't make this decision now. Not like this. Not with him drunk, with both of us too vulnerable, with everything so heavy in the air. Rafa, I said slowly, choosing each word carefully. Let's talk about this tomorrow, when you're sober, when we can actually think about what this means. Okay? He blinked a few times, processing, and then nodded, half disappointed, half relieved. Okay, tomorrow we'll talk. But we both know you're going to remember this tomorrow, right? I needed to confirm. Because if he woke up with no memory of this moment, I wouldn't be able to handle it. He gave a crooked smile. I'll remember. I didn't drink that much. I just needed courage to ask. Courage to ask. As if I didn't need much more than courage to answer. He got up from the couch, staggering slightly, and went to his room. I stayed alone in the living room, the sound of the shower running in the background and the weight of the whole world on my shoulders. My phone vibrated in my pocket again. I took it out and saw it was a message from my friend Clara. You okay? It's been a while since you replied. I ignored it. I didn't have the energy to deal with anything that wasn't that impossible moment. I stood up and went to the balcony window. The city below pulsed with normal life. People living their normal lives, having normal problems. And there I was, with my heart shattered because my straight best friend asked me to practice kissing with him before he went out with someone else. If someone told me this story, I'd probably laugh at the absurdity. But there was nothing funny about it. Only pain. And hope. And a question that had been haunting me for 3 years and was now more alive than ever. Does he feel anything for me? Is there any chance, however small, that this request means more than he understands himself? I pressed my forehead against the cold glass of the window and closed my eyes. Tomorrow we'll talk. Tomorrow I'll have to face this situation head on. Tomorrow I'll find out if all these years of silent suffering were worth anything, or if I'm just a lovesick idiot who saw signs where there were none. But one thing I knew for sure. Tomorrow, when the sun rose and Rafa woke up, the conversation we were going to have would change everything, for better or worse. And I had no idea what the outcome would be. I just knew I couldn't run away anymore. I couldn't pretend anymore. I couldn't keep collecting crumbs while dying inside piece by piece. Tomorrow the truth would come out, and I was terrified. But also, for the first time in 3 years, I was hopeful. Because maybe, just maybe, I would finally get an answer. And any answer, even the worst one, was better than continuing to live in that eternal limbo of uncertainty. Tomorrow arrived, and I was completely terrified. I woke up on the living room couch at 7 on Saturday morning with a stiff neck, sunlight coming through the balcony and hitting my face, and that awful feeling that something important was about to happen, and I had no control over the outcome. You know when you book a dentist appointment to have a wisdom tooth pulled, and you spend the whole night barely sleeping because you keep thinking about the pain ahead? It was exactly like that, only instead of a wisdom tooth, it was my 7-year friendship that was at stake. Rafa was still asleep in his room. You could hear his heavy breathing through the slightly open door. He'd always slept like a rock, especially after drinking. But I knew that when he woke up, he'd remember everything. Because when I said, "We'll talk about this tomorrow when you're sober," he looked me straight in the eyes and replied, "Okay, Lucas, we really need to talk." There was no alcoholic fog in that look. There was awareness. There was fear. There was something I couldn't identify, but that kept me awake until 4 in the morning trying to decipher it. I went to the kitchen to make coffee, hands shaking, measuring the coffee grounds 3 times because I lost count. Those automatic Saturday morning motions, but nothing felt automatic. Everything seemed to carry extra weight. The sound of the coffee maker, the smell of brewed coffee, the morning light illuminating the room where 12 hours earlier Rafa had asked me to practice with him. Practice what exactly? Kissing? Having sex? Pretending he felt something for a girl he was going to meet when what he really wanted was to feel something for me? Stop. Breathe. You're building expectations again. You're doing exactly what you promised you wouldn't. But how could I not build up expectations when the guy I've loved for 3 years asks you for sexual help at 11 on a Friday night and then sleeps in his own room like he hasn't just torn my whole world apart? I heard the bedroom door open. Heavy footsteps in the hallway. My heart raced. I pretended to be totally focused, pouring coffee into the mug, but my hands were shaking so much I spilled a little on the counter. Rafa showed up in the kitchen in a gray hoodie, hair completely messy, that look of someone who just woke up, but also like they hadn't slept a wink. He stopped at the kitchen entrance, looked at me. I looked at him, and for about 5 seconds that felt like 5 hours. No one said anything. He broke the silence. "You made coffee." Brilliant, Rafa. Remarkable observation. Of course I made coffee. It's what I always do every Saturday morning for the last 2 years since we've shared this apartment. But instead of saying that, I just answered, "I did," and handed him a mug. He took it. Our fingers touched for a second. He looked away. We went to the living room. Sat on the gray corner sofa where everything started the night before. Me on one end, him on the other. A safe distance. A distance that had never existed between us before, but now felt absolutely necessary because any closeness would make my brain short-circuit. We drank coffee in silence. The kind of uncomfortable silence that had never been between me and Rafa. We always had that easy chemistry, you know? That friendship where silence is comfortable because you don't need to fill every second with conversation. But this was different. This was a heavy silence, loaded with unspoken things, with questions neither of us wanted to ask, but that were there, occupying every inch of space between us. He spoke first. Again. "So, about last night." My stomach flipped. "About last night," I repeated, like that would buy time, like I hadn't spent the whole night rehearsing this conversation in my head. Rafa put his mug on the coffee table, ran a hand through his hair. That gesture he always makes when he's nervous. He took a deep breath. And then, finally, really looked at me. I remember everything, just to be clear. I'm not going to pretend I was so drunk I didn't know what I was saying. I knew. I know. I don't know how to start this conversation. Something inside me broke and rearranged at the same time. He remembered. He wasn't going to pretend nothing happened. That was something. But it also meant I had to face this straight on, without the comfort of pretending he doesn't remember. "Then start at the start," I said, trying to keep steady. "Why did you ask me?" Rafa closed his eyes for a moment. When he opened them, there was vulnerability I rarely saw. Rafa had always been the confident guy. The successful startup engineer everyone loves. The guy who walks into a party and befriends half the room in 30 minutes. But there, right then, he looked completely lost. Because I'm broken, Lucas. I think something's off with me. I blinked. Wrong how? Off like. I can't connect with anyone anymore. You know that girl I was supposed to meet yesterday? Julia? We've been talking for 3 weeks. She's incredible, smart, funny, gorgeous. On paper, she's exactly who I should be pumped to meet. But every time I imagine actually going out with her, kissing her, anything beyond texting, I feel nothing. Absolutely nothing. He laughed. Not a happy laugh. One of those awkward laughs when you're embarrassed by how vulnerable you're being. You're probably thinking, wow, Rafa, what a problem. You can't get aroused by a hot girl. Sounds like a rich guy complaint, right? But it's not that. It's not about arousal. It's about connection. I haven't been able to connect with anyone for months. It's been happening for, God, almost a year. Every date, every conversation, I feel completely disconnected. Like I'm performing, playing the interested guy, and the only person I don't feel that way with is you. My heart stopped. Actually stopped for 3 whole seconds. With me? Came out in a thin voice. With you, Rafa confirmed, now looking straight at me, not looking away. You're the only person I can be myself with. The only person I actually want to see when I get home after a rough day at work. The only person who makes me feel whole. There, that was it. The moment I'd waited 3 years for without ever believing it would happen. Rafa had just admitted I was special. That he felt complete with me. The words I'd rehearsed hundreds of times, imagining what it'd be like to hear them. But reality never matches imagination. Because along with the burst of hope came absolute terror. What if he'd only realized he values me as a friend? What if complete didn't mean what I wanted? What if I was seeing signs that weren't there again? But there was one different thing. One crucial thing. Rafa wouldn't have asked me to help him practice if it were just friendship. No one asks their best friend to help practice kissing. No one. Unless you're not as straight as you thought you were. I took a deep breath. This was it. Either I asked the right question or I'd regret it forever. Rafa, you just told me I'm the only person you feel complete with. That you haven't connected with anyone for a year. And yesterday you asked me to help you practice before meeting a girl. He nodded slowly, waiting for me to continue. And have you thought about why? The silence that followed was deafening. Rafa opened his mouth, closed it, looked away, looked at the window, the coffee mug, everywhere but at me. And I watched him wrestling with something inside his head in real time. Some truth he didn't want to face but was there, knocking on the door, demanding attention. I don't know, he finally answered, his voice off, weak, like he was lying and knew I could tell. You don't know? I pressed, something inside me awakening, some courage I didn't know I had. Or you don't want to admit it. He looked at me, and for the first time in 7 years, I saw real fear in his eyes. Not fear of failing a test, not fear of losing a job, the kind of fear that comes when you're about to confront something that could change everything about yourself. The kind I knew well, because I lived with it for years before I finally accepted I was gay. Lucas, He stopped, swallowed hard, ran his hand over his face, and then something completely unexpected happened. He laughed. It wasn't a laugh of joy. It was a nervous laugh. One of those that comes out when you're so tense you can't take the pressure anymore and have to release it somehow. He laughed, put his hands on his head, messing his hair even more, and said, "Man, what a bizarre situation," before laughing again. But this time, the laugh had an edge of desperation. I didn't know whether to laugh with him, hug him, or finally say everything that's been stuck in my throat for 3 years. But before I could decide, he stopped laughing, looked at me again. And the vulnerability I saw there was so pure, so raw, it made me want to cry. I'm scared, Lucas. I'm so scared to think about the why. And that's when I realized. This conversation wasn't going to end today. This conversation was only beginning, because the question I had just asked, "Have you thought about why?" wasn't something you answered in 5 minutes. It was the question that changes everything. The question that, depending on the answer, could completely transform both our lives. I'd opened Pandora's box, and now there was no closing it. "So maybe it's time to stop being afraid and start really thinking," I said softly, holding his gaze. "Because I'm not going to pretend this conversation didn't happen. I'm not going to pretend you didn't ask me that yesterday, and I'm definitely not going to pretend that what you just told me means nothing." Rafa took a deep breath, trembling, and I could see him processing everything, every word, every implication, every terrifying possibility of what was coming next. "And have you thought about why?" He returned the question, a gentle accusation in it now. Like he was saying, "You're asking like you're neutral, but we both know you're not." My heart sped up. This was it. Either I lied and pretended I was just a good friend trying to help, or I finally, after 3 years, told the truth. But before I could answer, my phone vibrated on the table. Once, twice, 3 times, messages coming in. The outside world reminding us it still existed, even though time had stopped in here. Rafa looked at the phone, looked at me. I saw the same conflict in him, the desire to finish this conversation, and absolute terror of what we'd find at the end. "Do we need to answer that?" he asked. And it wasn't about the phone. It was about the question he'd asked me. It was about everything being said and unsaid at the same time. "I don't know," I answered honestly. "But if we don't answer it now, it will stay lodged forever." He nodded slowly, put the mug in his lap, looked at the window, where the Saturday morning sun lit up the city outside, people going about their lives with no idea that in here, in this apartment in Pinheiros, 2 best friends were about to cross a line of no return. "And have you thought about why?" He repeated the question, firmer this time. He wasn't going to let me escape. "Why are you pushing me so hard to face this? What do you want me to discover, Lucas?" The question hung in the air, heavy, inevitable. The truth knocking at the door so hard it could no longer be ignored, and I realized there was no more running, no more collecting crumbs, no more pretending everything was fine. The conversation I'd avoided for 3 whole years was finally happening. And I had 2 options. Either I was honest and risked losing everything, or I lied once more and lost the chance for something real. I looked at Rafa. He looked at me. And in that silence, I knew he already had some idea of the answer. Maybe not the whole truth, but enough to be as terrified as I was. "Rafa, I think before I answer that, you need to answer the question I asked first. Why did you ask me that yesterday? Why me, specifically? And why can't you connect with anyone else but with me do you feel complete?" He closed his eyes. He took a deep breath, and when he opened them again, there were tears there. Not falling, just there, ready. "Because I think I already know the answer," he whispered, "and I'm terrified of it." And that's when everything changed. Because admitting he already knew the answer, even without saying it out loud, was the same as confirming everything I'd secretly hoped for years. It was admitting that what he felt for me wasn't just friendship. It was admitting that maybe, just maybe, he was wrestling with feelings he shouldn't have, or felt he shouldn't have. "Then say it," I asked, my voice shaking. "Say the answer." He shook his head. "I can't, not yet. I need time." Time, the word I hated most in the universe. Because time was what I'd given myself for 3 whole years, waiting for the right moment that never came. And now Rafa was asking for the same thing. More time, more waiting, more uncertainty. But there was a difference. This time he had admitted there was an answer, that he already knew what it was. He just wasn't ready to say it out loud, and that, as frustrating as it was progress. It was more than I'd gotten in 3 years. "Okay," I said, even though nothing was okay. "How much time do you need?" He let out an awkward laugh. "I don't know. A few hours, a few days, a few years." I don't have a few years, I replied before I could stop myself. He looked at me, surprised. Why? And then I realized the hole I'd dug. Because to answer that question, I would have to admit I'd been waiting for years. That I couldn't stand waiting anymore. That every day without an answer was another day dying on the inside. But maybe it was time to start being honest. Even if slowly. Even if scared. Because this conversation is happening now, Rafa. And if we leave it for later, we'll keep putting it off forever. I know you. You'll find an excuse. You'll say you need to think more. You'll avoid the subject until it disappears. And I can't let that happen. Not this time. He fell silent. Processing. And I could see the internal struggle playing out in real time. Rational Rafa trying to find a way out. Emotional Rafa realizing there was no way out. Not anymore. You're right, he finally admitted. If we don't sort this now, we'll never sort it. I nodded. Then, we sort it. How? Good question. How do you resolve a situation where both people are afraid to tell the truth? Where both know any honest answer will change everything? We start by being honest, I said. A little at a time. No pressure to have all the answers now. But no running away either. Rafa took a deep breath. Okay. So, honesty. Honesty. He looked at me, straight into my eyes, and the question he asked next caught me completely off guard. Lucas, do you have feelings for me? There it was. The question I'd avoided answering my whole life. The truth I'd hidden for 3 years. The secret that, if revealed, could either destroy everything or finally fix it. My mouth was dry, my heart beating so hard I was sure he could hear it. And all the excuses, all the lies I'd rehearsed in case this question ever came, vanished. Because I'd just promised honesty. And there was no turning back. I swallowed. I looked at him. And I opened my mouth to finally, after all these years, tell the truth. Yes. The word came out a whisper, but it landed like a confession in court. My voice shook, and I felt my heart pound so fiercely it felt like it might explode. There was no turning back. After 3 years keeping this secret like poison, I'd finally said it out loud. Yes, Rafa, I have feelings for you. He stayed motionless. Completely motionless. As if the world had stopped spinning and we were suspended in that moment, in that room, in that heavy silence that threatened to suffocate me. I saw his chest rise and fall, his breathing getting faster. I saw his hands clench his knees, his fingers white from the grip, and his eyes. His eyes were fixed on me, but it wasn't anger I saw. It was fear. Pure fear. How long? He asked, his voice hoarse. I swallowed. 3 years. He let out a short, nervous, almost hysterical laugh. 3 years, and you never said anything. How was I supposed to say it? My voice came out louder than I intended, loaded with all the frustration I'd been holding. How, Rafa? You're my best friend. We share an apartment. If I said it and if you didn't feel the same, I'd lose everything. I'd lose you. He ran his hand over his face, gripping his short hair hard, and I saw him close his eyes trying to process it all. When he finally spoke, his voice was broken. I don't know what to do with this, Lucas. You don't have to do anything, I said quickly, trying to fix the damage, even though I knew it was too late. I'm not asking anything of you, I couldn't lie anymore. You asked for honesty, and I'm being honest. But what if... He started, then stopped mid-sentence, as if afraid to finish the thought. What if what? He opened his eyes and looked at me, and for the first time since this conversation began, I saw something beyond confusion in that look. I saw vulnerability. Raw, pure fear. What if I feel something too? The air left my lungs like someone had punched me in the stomach. My brain froze. I had rehearsed 1,000 times in my head how I would confess my feelings to him. I had imagined rejection, anger, disgust, distance. But never in any of my most optimistic scenarios had I imagined that he could. that he could feel something back. What do you mean by something? My voice came out shaky, full of hope and terror at the same time. He got up from the couch and started pacing back and forth in the living room, like he needed to move to think. I don't know, Lucas. I don't know what I feel. I just know that when I'm with you, it's different. It's all easier, lighter, more real. He stopped pacing and stared at me, his eyes shining with tears he was fighting not to let fall. With the girls I date, it's always so forced. I have to pretend I'm interested, force a connection that never comes. But with you, I don't have to pretend anything. I'm me. And that scares the hell out of me. Why? I asked, standing up too, taking a step toward him. Why does that scare you? Because I don't know what it means, he practically shouted, his voice full of desperation. I've always been straight, Lucas. Always. I've never questioned that. And now you're telling me you feel something for me, and I can't deny that there's something here I don't understand. And if I feel it, who am I? There it was. The question he'd avoided the entire conversation. The question at the heart of all his fear, of all the confusion. If he admitted he felt something for me, what would that say about who he was? About the identity he'd built his whole life around? I took another step toward him, slowly, like approaching a frightened animal. You are you, Rafa. Feeling something for me doesn't change who you are. It just adds a layer you didn't know was there. But what if it changes everything? He whispered, and I saw a tear slip from the corner of his eye. What if I admit it and lose everything I've built? My family, my friends, my life, everything I know about myself? I wanted to hug him, to take his hand and tell him it would be okay, that we'd figure it out together. But I knew I couldn't, because this wasn't my battle to fight. This was his. He needed to come to his own conclusions, in his own time. What are you afraid of exactly? I asked, my voice soft. Of feeling something for me? Or of admitting to yourself that you've probably felt this for a while? He stared at me, eyes wide, as if I'd just revealed a secret he didn't even know he was keeping. And maybe I had. Because the further this conversation went, the clearer it became that he wasn't discovering new feelings. He was finally admitting feelings that had already been there. He started, but his voice broke. He rubbed his eyes with the palms of his hands, trying to compose himself. I don't know. I don't know anything, Lucas. My head is a mess. That's okay, I said, taking one more step until we were only inches apart. You don't have to have all the answers now, but I need to know. What do you want to do about this? He looked at me, and for a second, just a second, I saw something in his eyes that made my heart race. Was it desire, curiosity, fear mixed with hope? I couldn't decipher it, but it was there, undeniable and intense. I don't know, he repeated, voice barely audible. But I think I need to find out. My heart was beating so fast I could barely breathe. And how do you plan to do that? He stepped back, creating distance between us, and I felt his absence like a vacuum. I need to think. I need to process all of this. Because if I really feel something for you, Lucas, it changes everything. And I don't know if I'm ready for that. I nodded, even though every fiber of my being wanted to shout that he didn't need to be ready, that we could find out together, that I'd waited 3 years and could wait a little longer. But I couldn't pressure him. I couldn't force him. Because in the end, this decision had to be his. Okay, I said, my voice coming out firmer than I felt. I understand. He looked at me with an expression that was both grateful and tormented. Thank you for being honest, for being you. I forced a smile, even though inside I was falling apart. I've always been me, Rafa. You just didn't know that this me was here the whole time. He let out a short, humorless laugh, then turned to leave, probably to his room to process the bomb that had exploded between us. But before he reached the door, he stopped and looked back. Lucas? Yes? You said you feel something for me, but What exactly? My heart froze. Because I knew that if I answered that question, there would be no going back. If I put into words what I truly felt, the whole thing would become real in a way that couldn't be ignored. But he had asked me for honesty. And after 3 years of hiding, I couldn't back down now. I took a deep breath, looked straight into his eyes, and said the only truth that mattered. Rafa, I need to tell you something I've been holding on to for a long time. I took a deep breath. 3 years of silence were about to collapse into one sentence. 3 years of hiding, of concealing, of laughing when what I really wanted was to kiss him. 3 years of pretending everything was fine while he told me about every new girl, every date that didn't work out. Every time he came home frustrated and flopped onto the couch beside me as if I were a safe harbor. And maybe I was, but not in the way he thought. I looked at him. Rafa sat there, just inches from me, his eyes red, his breathing still uneven, waiting. He had asked me for honesty, had asked what I felt, and now there was no running away. Because if I ran now, it would be a lie. And after all the conversations we'd already had, after everything we'd said, lying would destroy whatever was left between us. So I said it. Rafa, I'm in love with you. Silence. It wasn't that dramatic movie silence. It was heavy, suffocating, as if the air in the room had thickened. I saw his expression change. It wasn't shock. It wasn't anger. It was fear. Pure fear. As if he'd just heard something he'd always known but never wanted to admit out loud. How long? His voice came out weak, almost a whisper. 3 years. He shut his eyes. He squeezed them tight, as if that could erase what I'd just said. But when he opened them again, tears were streaming down his face. And they weren't tears of sadness. They were something much worse. They were the tears of someone falling apart inside. 3 years, Lucas? He repeated, his voice trembling. You stayed by my side for 3 years feeling this and never said anything? Because I was scared. Scared of losing you. Scared our friendship would end. Scared you'd look at me differently and I'd just be another weird guy who couldn't handle his own feelings. He shook his head slowly, like he was trying to process it and couldn't. You don't understand, Lucas. You don't understand what this means. Then explain it to me. Rafa stood up. He started pacing the room, hands in his hair, pulling like he wanted to rip the thoughts out. He was panicking. I could see it. The quickening breath, the jerky steps, the way he avoided my gaze. It was like watching someone disintegrate in real time. It means you were right, he said suddenly, stopping in the middle of the room. You were right when you asked why I feel this way only with you. Why I never managed with anyone else what I can when I'm near you. He turned to me, and what I saw on his face was devastating. It was despair. It was confusion. It was someone who'd spent his whole life building a version of himself and now watched that version crumble. I feel something for you, Lucas. I don't know what it is. I don't know how to name it, but I feel it. And it terrifies me. My heart raced, because that was it. It was exactly what I needed to hear, and at the same time everything I feared. Because if he felt it, we couldn't keep pretending. If he felt it, the whole thing got too real, too dangerous. Why does it terrify you? He laughed. It was a humorless, bitter, desperate laugh. Because I have spent my whole life knowing exactly who I was, Lucas. I knew I liked women. I knew I'd get married, have kids, do everything everyone expects. And then there's you. You, who know me better than anyone in the world. You who are always here, who understand me, who make me feel complete in a way no one else can, and I don't know how to deal with that. His tears fell without stopping now. He didn't even try to hide them. When I asked you to help me practice yesterday, I was drunk, but I knew what I was doing. I wanted an excuse. I wanted a way to get close to you without admitting that's what I really wanted. Because if I admitted it, everything I thought I knew about myself would fall apart. I stood up, walked to him. I wanted to touch, to hug, to do something to take away all that pain. But when he reached out his hand, he pulled back. No, Lucas. Don't touch me right now. Please. His voice broke on the last word. Why? Because if you touch me, I'll fall apart. And I need to stay whole for at least a few more minutes. I need to understand what's happening to me. So we stood there, frozen, a meter apart, but separated by a huge chasm of fear, doubt, everything we'd never had the courage to face before. I looked at him and saw a 27-year-old terrified to be who he really was. And he looked at me and saw 3 years of silent pain I had carried alone. What do we do now? I asked. Rafa wiped his face with the back of his hand. He took a deep breath, tried to compose himself, but it was obvious he was on the verge of collapse. I don't know. I honestly have no idea. Do you want me to leave? I can crash at a friend's tonight, give you space to think. No. The answer came fast, almost desperate. No, I don't want you to go, I need time to process all of this. How long? I don't know, a few hours. A few days? A few years? I don't know, Lucas. I've never been through this before. He sat down on the floor. Just that. He collapsed there in the middle of the room, leaning against the wall, his head between his knees. And it was the saddest thing I'd ever seen. Because he wasn't weak. Rafa had never been weak. But there, in that moment, he was completely shattered. I sat on the floor too, not close to him. I left about 2 meters of distance because that's what he needed. But I wasn't going to leave him alone either. Not now. Not after everything. You know what's the craziest part of all this? He said, his voice muffled, head still between his knees. It's that, when I'm with you, I feel more myself than at any other time in my life. And at the same time, I have no idea who I am when I'm with you. I get it. He lifted his head, looked at me with those red, swollen eyes. You really get it? I do. Because I don't know who I am without you either, Rafa. And maybe that's it. Maybe we don't need to have all the answers right now. Silence again. But this time it was different. It wasn't that suffocating silence from before. It was a silence of exhaustion. Of 2 people who had said everything they needed to say and now didn't have the strength to continue. Minutes passed. I don't even know how many. The light coming through the window began to change. It must have been late afternoon already. We had spent the whole day on this. Talking, breaking, exposing ourselves in ways we never imagined we'd have to. At some point, Rafa lay down on the floor. Just closed his eyes and lay there, as if the weight of everything had finally beaten him. I stayed where I was, sitting, watching him. And it was strange. Because even with all that pain, with all that confusion, it was still Rafa. Still my best friend. And I still loved him. I don't know how long passed until exhaustion got me too. I lay down right there on the floor, on the other side of the room. Not on the couch, not close to him. Just there, on the rug, staring at the ceiling, feeling the weight of 3 years finally lifting off my shoulders. The last thing I remember before I blacked out was the sound of his breathing. Slow, heavy, tired. And we slept. Both of us on the floor of our living room, separated by meters but connected by everything that had been said. There was no kiss, no hug, no resolution. There was only the naked, raw truth between us. And maybe, for now, that was enough. When I woke up, I had no idea what was going to happen. If he would still be there. If we could look at each other without collapsing again. If our friendship had survived, or if we had just destroyed 7 years in one afternoon. But in that moment, sleeping on the living room floor, too exhausted to think, too devastated to act, we had done the only thing that mattered. We had been honest. When I woke up, the first thing I felt was the weight. Not the physical weight of the blanket someone had thrown over me during the night. It was the weight of everything that had been said. Of all the truths that had finally come out. Of 7 years of friendship that, in one afternoon, had turned into something completely different. Something we still didn't know how to name. I opened my eyes slowly. Sunday light came through the living room window. That soft, lazy mid-morning light. I was on the couch, curled up, my head resting on his arm. And Rafa was there. Still there. On the other side of the couch, sleeping upright, his head thrown back in a way I knew would leave his neck sore all day. He had stayed. That was the second thing I felt. Relief. A relief so big it almost hurt. Because during those hours of sleep, in the deep place where fears live, I was sure that when I woke up he wouldn't be there anymore. That he'd have run off in the night, unable to face what we had done, what we had said to each other. But he was there. Sleeping awkwardly, yes. But there. I spent about 5 minutes just watching him. The way his chest rose and fell, calm, steady. The way the morning light hit his face, highlighting the dark circles that had formed under his eyes. We had spent the night crying, too exhausted to do anything else besides fall asleep where we were. I got up slowly, trying not to make noise. My muscles were tight, my neck ached, and my mouth had that awful taste of someone who had been awake all night before finally passing out. I needed coffee. We needed coffee. In the kitchen, I did the usual ritual: grind the beans, put them in the stovetop espresso maker, wait for the water to boil. But this time, every movement felt heavier, as if I were doing everything for the first time, relearning how to function in a world where Rafa knew, where he knew everything, where we couldn't pretend anymore. Have you ever felt that fear that everything's going to be different now? Not necessarily different in a bad way, just different. As if every gesture, every word, every look had gained a new weight, a meaning that didn't exist before. As if we'd walked through a door we couldn't go back through, and now the only option was to move forward to whatever was on the other side. I was filling 2 mugs when I heard the sound of him moving in the living room. Heavy steps, a low groan of pain, probably from the horrible position he'd slept in, and then silence. He appeared at the kitchen doorway a few seconds later. Messy hair, puffy eyes, wrinkled t-shirt. He looked exhausted. But when his eyes met mine, I saw something I didn't expect to see. It wasn't fear. It wasn't regret. It was a kind of tired determination, as if he'd made a decision overnight and was now ready to face whatever came next. I said nothing. I just held out one of the mugs to him. He agreed, and our fingers touched for a second. It was the kind of touch that used to mean nothing. But now it meant everything. And we both knew it. Both of us knew. We drank our coffee in silence for a while. Not that heavy. Suffocating silence from the night before, when we were sitting on the living room floor, emotions raw, not knowing what to do with them. This was a different kind of silence. Lighter. Not exactly comfortable, but possible. Like we were learning to exist next to each other in this new version of our friendship, or whatever we were now. It was Rafa who broke the silence first. He set his mug down on the counter, ran a hand over his face and spoke softly, almost in a whisper. I don't know what this means. I looked at him. I waited. He kept going, his voice firmer now, but still carrying that raw vulnerability he'd shown yesterday afternoon. I don't know what we are. I don't know what I feel exactly. I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow, or next week, or next month. I don't have answers, Lucas. I don't have anything figured out in my head. He paused, his eyes fixed on mine, and I could see the effort he was making to keep going. To not run. To be honest. But I do know one thing. I don't want to pretend this didn't happen. I don't want to pretend I didn't say what I said yesterday. I don't want to wake up tomorrow and act like we can go back to the way things were before, because we can't. And I think I don't want to. His words hung in the air between us, heavy, sincere, frightening. And I realized that was the answer I needed to hear. Not a definite answer, not a declaration of eternal love, or a promise that we'd become a couple and live happily ever after, but an honest answer. A promise that we'd try, that he wouldn't run. I don't want to pretend either, I replied, my voice rougher than I expected. I don't know what we are. I don't know what this means. But I know I don't want to take a step back. I don't want to pretend I didn't feel what I felt. I don't want to pretend you didn't say what you felt. We've spent too much time pretending. He nodded slowly, and for the first time since we woke up, I saw a hint of a smile on his face. Not a happy smile. Not yet. But a tired, relieved smile. As if he too had been waiting for that confirmation. As if he too needed to know we'd try to navigate this together without having all the answers. We stayed in the kitchen for a few more minutes, finishing our coffee, exchanging looks that didn't need words. And then, without planning it, we went back to the living room. But this time, we didn't sit at opposite ends of the couch. We sat in the middle, side by side, our shoulders almost touching. I put the TV on at a low volume just to have some background noise. Some random Sunday show neither of us was really watching. But it didn't matter. We didn't need entertainment. We just needed to be there, together. And it was strange. Strange in a way I can't fully explain. Because from the outside, if someone looked at us, they'd see nothing special. Two friends on a Sunday morning couch, a little slack, still emotionally hungover from the night before. But inside, for us, everything was different. Every second was loaded with meaning. Every silence was an active choice not to run. Every breath was an affirmation that we were still there, together, trying. At some point, Rafa rested his head on my shoulder. It was a small, almost imperceptible move, but I felt it. God, I felt it, and I didn't pull away. I didn't do anything to break that moment. I just let him stay there, with the weight of his head on my shoulder, while the TV continued to play softly in the background. We didn't kiss. We didn't make promises. We didn't define what we were or what we would be. Because the truth was, we didn't know. And it was okay not to know. What mattered was that we were there. That we had been honest. That we'd faced those